All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome. I know that some folks are still trickling in, but we're going to go ahead and get started today. I've got it just 2 minutes after 12. So welcome to today's webinar. We're talking about understanding the new Chesapeake Bay climate change informed IDF curves. Really excited to have you all here. First, I'll introduce myself. My name is David Wood. I'm the Stormwater Coordinator with the Chesapeake Stormwater Network. I'll tell you a little bit about who we are in just a second for those of you who are maybe not familiar with us and our organization. But basically today, I'm really excited to have some great speakers here to talk about some really great new work and a new tool to help stormwater managers kind of understand how climate change is affecting our precipitation regimes and ultimately stormwater management. It is a bit of a deeper dive than maybe what some of you have gotten in the past. So, certainly bear with us. We are also working on tools to kind of help make all of this information really accessible, but we are going to be going into some of the methods as well as results and a demonstration of the tool today. So with that, I'll go ahead and get us going. So just a couple of reminders for folks sort of on the housekeeping, right? We do have a couple of poll questions at the beginning today, just to give us a sense of who you are, what you're looking for from our talk today. So if you're watching with a group, just kind of pick the option that best represents your group or your organization as a whole. I'm going to pop them all up at the same time. So there will be 3 poll questions and you can just kind of work your way through. We are going to do Q&A today through the Q&A feature. Feel free to also use the chat if you prefer. You can put those questions in anytime throughout the presentations. I will be serving as a moderator. I'll be keeping track of those questions as we go along. We'll try to answer some of them, sort of clarification type questions, live as we go, but we will have a designated Q&A sort of discussion period at the end of our session. We are recording today's presentation, so we are going to have it ready to post at the end of the day today. We'll get it up on our website. We'll also send it out to everyone. So in case you have to jump off early or you want to share it with a colleague or something like that, we'll have that available to you. And then finally, we do appreciate your feedback. We're a nonprofit organization, so we like to let our funders know, how we're doing with these webcasts. We also like to gather information about what you liked, what you learned, what we can do in future webcasts that might be of interest to you. So it'll take less than 3 minutes to fill out. I think it's only 4 questions today. So we really, really appreciate you taking a moment to do that when we're all done. So again, just by way of introduction, the Chesapeake Stormwater Network, we're just a 2-person nonprofit organization. We provide training and technical capacity resources, mostly for local government stormwater managers, but also folks sort of in the private sector, NGO communities as well. We encourage you, if you're not familiar with us, you can join our network. It is no charge. It just means you're signed up for our newsletters, essentially. You get updates from us once a month about our annual webcast series, like the one we're doing today. All of our new resources and fact sheets, our Best Urban BMP and the Bay Awards, and plenty more. So feel free to go over and check us out. I hope you like what you hear today and are interested in joining. So today's agenda, we are going to start. I'm just really quickly going to set the stage. And then we're going to dive in to a little bit of an introduction on climate change projections and IDF curves for those who are maybe a little bit more new to the topic. Then sort of dive in a little bit deeper on the methods for how these climate change informed IDF curves were developed, and then sort of wrap up with the results and tool demonstration before getting into some Q&A. So just again, for context for the work, the scope for this project was developed about 1.5 years ago, I guess now, by the Chesapeake Bay Program's Urban Stormwater Work Group and funded through the Bay Program's Goal Implementation Team funding process, which is administered by the Chesapeake Bay Trust. So we were really excited to have Michelle and Art and Costa be involved in this project. And it sort of goes along with a number of other tools and resources that we were working on at the time through the Urban Stormwater Work Group and the Chesapeake Stormwater Network. So, I just wanted to mention that we have a series of other reports that sort of help to to put a little bit more context from the stormwater side of things on these changing precipitation values going forward and sort of what they mean for stormwater managers. So we have a memo where we, surveyed over 200 stormwater professionals around the watershed on sort of their concerns and needs around climate change and resilience. Then we sort of dove into what the current state of management is in terms of the design guidelines as they exist across the watershed. And then sort of synthesizing some of the research that had been done actually prior to this work on developing downscaled climate change projections. And then finally, the fourth memo really is sort of the culmination of all of that in terms of what does it mean for the vulnerability of our stormwater best management practices? And then how do we start looking towards some resilient design considerations as we evaluate and maybe reconsider some of those designs and local ordinances. So the link to these reports is at the top of the page if you're interested in checking those out. We also have done webinars and webcasts in the past, which you can find in our archives on our website as well. So with that, I will go ahead and launch our poll questions. We have 3 of them for you all today, as I mentioned. So first is to just tell us a little bit about yourself and who you're representing today. We sort of like to know if you are coming from, a local government or a state government organization, federal government, private sector, NGO, academia. Again, it sort of lets us know who we're reaching with our webcasts and with our audience. Especially today, we have a much larger audience than we do sometimes because of the exciting nature of the topic. So I definitely want to know who's here with us. The second question today is to tell us a little bit about what you're looking for. So, are you mostly looking to kind of understand how these, climate change informed IDF curves were developed? Are you really kind of just looking to see what the results are, or maybe how to use the tools so that you can dive in a little bit more yourself? Or obviously, and maybe most popularly, some combination of those. And then finally, just how has your organization worked with climate projections for stormwater planning in the past? Is it something that's new to you all? It's either currently sort of too difficult, or maybe you're planning on doing it and just sort of waiting for results like these or a little bit of a better understanding. And if you have, we'd love to know that as well. And certainly any details you want to provide for us are always helpful. You can put those in the chat. There's also an opportunity if you want to wait to our evaluation survey at the end. Tell us a little bit about your efforts because we'd love to reach out and talk to you about it. All right, so I'll go ahead and close that up. We've got almost 200 responses coming in now. So I'll go ahead and see if I can turn these around for a second. We've got a really nice spread of results here. About 34% local government, about a quarter of folks from the state government, and then a pretty even smattering of folks from the other sectors. As I suspected, it's a combination in terms of what you're looking for. But I am excited to see that there's a number of folks who are kind of interested in this deeper dive as well. And then finally, it just looks like a lot of you have sort of an emerging interest in working with these projections for stormwater planning. And I'm really excited to see that almost half of you have actually started this process to some degree or another. So I'll go ahead and close that and move us along here. And so what I want to do now is that's sort of the end of my stage setting. So I'm ready to go ahead and introduce our speakers today. I'll just introduce everybody pretty quickly, and then I'll turn it over to Michelle to take things away from there. So Dr. Michelle Miro is a water resources engineer at the RAND Corporation. She's a co-investigator for NOAA's Mid-Atlantic Regional Integrated Science and Assessment, or MIRISA program, where she leads climate adaptation and stormwater management research. So in this capacity, she's partnering with the Chesapeake Bay Trust to develop future projected IDF curves and a climate resilience scorecard for the Chesapeake Bay watershed. Dr. Miro's portfolio of work also includes flood risk communication and management in the Gulf Coast, disaster resilience and recovery in Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands, water supply and groundwater management in drought-prone regions, and climate threats and resilience strategies in the Great Lakes. So thanks, Michelle. We also have Dr. Art DeGaetano. Art received an interdisciplinary PhD focusing in climatology and horticulture from Rutgers University. He was an assistant professor in the Department of Meteorology at South Dakota School of Mines and Technology until 2001, where he began his career at Cornell as a research climatologist in the federally supported Northeast Regional Climate Center. He's currently a professor in the Department of Earth and Atmospheric Sciences and director of the NRCC. The mission of the Northeast Regional Climate Center is to enhance the use and dissemination of climate information on a wide variety of sectors in the Northeast. Art also serves as an editor for the American Meteorological Society Journal of Applied Meteorology and Climatology. So welcome, Art. And then finally, we have Dr. Kostas Samaras. Costa is an associate professor in the Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering and affiliated faculty in the Energy Science, Technology, and Policy program at Carnegie Mellon University. His research spans energy, climate change, automation, and defense analysis. Costa directs the Center for Engineering and Resilience for Climate Adaptation, is the director of the Power Sector Carbon Index, and is an adjunct senior researcher at the RAND Corporation. He has published numerous studies examining electric and automated vehicles, renewable energy, clean energy transition, and decarbonation policy. Climate resilience, was a contributor for the 4th National Climate Assessment and one of the lead author contributors to the Global Energy Assessment. So welcome, Costa. All right. So with that very esteemed panel of speakers, I will go ahead and turn it over to them. So Michelle, I'll go ahead and stop sharing and you can take it away from here.
Okay, sounds good. And I will give me a second while I get my screen up. Okay. Okay, well, thank you. I'll jump in. Thank you very much, David, for the fantastic introduction, and very honored to be a part of this team with Art and Costa. I'm going to kick us off and talk through the motivations behind our project that we're sharing the results and outputs of today, focused on incorporating climate change into stormwater design standards. So before actually I jump into all of that, I want to do kind of a similar round of really introductions and thank yous to the team. So first off, my colleague, Krista Ramita-Grohalski, who's potentially here today. There's so many of y'all participating. I haven't actually looked through the participant list, but really the other two teams that were core contributors, Carnegie Mellon, led by Dr. Costa Samaras, and really with fantastic contributions and really the lion's share of the data analysis on the CMU side from Dr. Tanya Lopez Cantu. So thank you to her and Marissa Weber as well. Also want to thank Dr. Art Dicatano, who's also here from Cornell, who also led a lot of the technical work, and we'll be talking through that this morning, and then a member of his team, Benjamin Eck, who did our web development. So thank you all for really being great partners throughout the project. And then just a moment to, as we all do in research, thank our funders. And I know David already mentioned the source of the funding for this project, but wanted to just highlight our GIT technical lead, Norm Goulet, who is a really fantastic partner to work with, who leads the Urban Stormwater Work Group from the Chesapeake Bay program. And then I just noticed somehow my computer connected twice, so apologies for that. There are two of me, but only one of me talking. And then actually our project after conception was extended. We had some excitement from the state of Virginia, from Ann Phillips, who really pulled together some funding, and some others who helped us bring in some extra funding to extend the work, not just to the boundaries of the Chesapeake Bay watershed, but to the full state of Virginia. So those of y'all from Virginia, you can say a big thank you with me to the Virginia Transportation Research Council and the Commonwealth Center for Recurrent Flooding Resiliency. Okay, so that is all now done. Into the actual project itself. So like many of you in the region and the larger mid-Atlantic region have noticed precipitation is changing. I mean, this summer alone, the amount of extreme precipitation and really storm events is pretty shocking. And what we've seen over the last decade is through analysis of observation data, precipitation observations, that the region has experienced increases in extreme precipitation. If we look forward to data from global climate models, we see that those increases are projected to grow by the end of the century. This figure here on the right is the result of a data tool that's available on the Mid-Atlantic RISA website that looked at this projected data, actually downscaled projected data from LOCA. And we'll talk a lot about that data set later. But that shows really a doubling. That dark green color shows a doubling in the number of days per year with precipitation above 3 inches. So that's a big change. And this is important when we think about stormwater design. To be able to design and build infrastructure, and in particularly what we're talking about today, stormwater, to withstand these changes that we're seeing and anticipating, design standards should reflect these anticipated changes and not just be focused solely on historical precipitation records. Where we've chosen to focus in the design space, really geared by the Bay program and the Urban Stormwater Work Group's interest, is IDF curves. And those of you, I know a lot of y'all are already using the tool and interested in this topic, but for those of you who are not familiar with IDF curves, they're the relationship between precipitation intensity, often shown as depth, so the number of inches of a storm, that storm's duration, so it could be 2 hours, 24 hours, and its frequency, think 2-year to 100-year storm event. So they're a mechanism by which we calculate those storm events. And they're typically based on statistical analysis of historic rainfall. The primary source of Atlas 14, or of IDF curves, excuse me, is Atlas 14. They're almost synonymous. So Atlas 14 is commonly used again for planning and design for most of the Chesapeake Bay watershed and all the state of Virginia. Atlas 14 Volume 2, which covers that region, does not incorporate data after 2000. So this is problematic given the increases we're seeing in precipitation over the last decade. So it's not incorporating those changes into the core data underlying Atlas 14 estimates. Importantly, Atlas 14 also relies on assumptions of what's called stationarity. And stationarity is a term in hydrology and really more broadly across climatology that means the variability seen in the historic record is assumed to continue into the future. And there's been a lot of research showing that's no longer the case in many regions. These are some of the challenges with applying Atlas 14, given both recent and future changes in extreme precipitation. And when we dive into actually looking at how Atlas 14 performs, what we've seen from recent work is that Atlas 14 may be underestimating both the magnitude and frequency of these extreme precipitation events. This is just a figure from not our study, but another study that a colleague of mine at RAND carried out over the last few years in partnership with Pittsburgh. So those of y'all who are from the area, you may know exactly where Negley Run Watershed is. And what this figure shows, if you just focus on the leftmost blue and green column, the blue column shows the total count of actual 2-year rainfall events. And 2-year was shown in Atlas 14 to be a 2.3-inch storm. So 18 2.3-inch rainfall events occurred between 2003 to 2018. And under the expected count from Atlas 14, that should have occurred 8 times. So over a 16-year period, a 2-year storm occurs 8 times, but Pittsburgh experienced it 18 times. And again, this is a limited example, but just a kind of a case study to illustrate some of the discrepancies that can occur when we're not taking into account recent changes in climate. Okay, so in this space, our goal as through our project was to build climate change informed IDF curves. To do that for the entire Chesapeake Bay watershed in Virginia, and to make them accessible and easy to use in a web-based tool. And we had a couple kind of tenets that we followed, or motivations as we built out the tool and the data set underlying it. The first being kind of everything I've already mentioned, that incorporating climate change into IDF curves enables infrastructure designers and stormwater managers to be potentially more resilient to these future precipitation events by incorporating that data into design. The second is we wanted this tool to be user-friendly, easy to use, and really importantly, as researchers, we wanted to provide the best available science to the region. So those were kind of some of the core principles underlying the tool's development, as well as the methodological development before even getting to the tool. And then the final piece is supporting kind of diverse applications of the data. And what we mean by that is there's no single best estimate of how precipitation is going to change in the future. So what we wanted to do in the tool is allow individuals to explore the range of potential changes that we're seeing in the range of climate model data. So users can make the best possible plans for their agency based on their own risk tolerances. And we'll talk a lot more about that as well. Okay, with that introduction and motivation, I'm going to pass to my colleague, Dr. Art DeGaetano, who will take you all through the first half of the methods.
Thanks, Michelle. So I think really the next part of our talk is going to be structured both along data and methods. So Costa and I will kind of pass the baton halfway through there. So kind of moving along, the first thing we'll talk about is the data sources that we used. So Michelle, I guess you have control, correct? Go on to the next. So basically, our data came from really 2 primary sources. The first one was actually station data. So this is in situ observations, primarily from the NOAA Cooperative Observer Network. These are once daily reporting stations for rainfall. As we'll see, there's actually several thousand of these stations across the region, but we kind of took a subset of that had the best quality of data and data availability. And then really going out into the future, our analysis was primarily based on downscaled global climate model data. And you can see all the acronyms and things there, but I think the take-home message is we first at least evaluated 4 different methods of downscaling data. And in the end, we ultimately used 2 of these methods to develop our projections. Go on to the next. So kind of hitting the station-based data first, really our subset of cooperative network stations ended up being just shy of 500 stations. And really to include them, they needed to be stations that were used by NOAA in their Atlas 14 Volume 2 in the Mid-Atlantic region. Basically here, the reason for doing this as we move on in the talk, you'll see that any of our projections for the future use these Atlas 14 sites as kind of the basis. So these are the benchmark for doing these types of intensity, duration, frequency curves. So we wanted our projections in the future to be rooted in the types of data that people are accustomed to using. The data record is a bit abbreviated or a bit different, I should say, from Atlas 14. It extends to the present, or at least to the present in terms of the study, 2019. And it has 1950 as its starting point. And the main reason here is to conform with the available data we had from the global circulation models. We wanted to use this historical period to make sure the models were doing an adequate job of estimating these rainfall extremes. And we wanted to also, again, limit the amount of missing data. We also examined hourly data. There are many fewer sites that report precipitation hourly. And across the region, there's about 85 of those from a number of different NOAA data sets. As we'll see later on, the hourly projections for the future are somewhat limited. We do have some limited data sets for doing that, but we felt it's important to look at that in terms of looking at subdaily intensities in our IDF curves. Go ahead, Michelle. In terms of the downscale data sets, they all start off with global scale climate models that come from the CMIP-5 suite of models. So that's kind of the most recent, we're in the transition point right now in the next global assessment, but these are the most recent suite of models that are available. Generally, they have data going from 1950, again, that starting point in our historical record, out to the end of the century, 2100. There's 35 of these models that are used, and that number varies between the different downscaling data sets, but in general, there are that many global models available. And we looked at two concentration pathways, basically emission scenarios, so to speak, from these models. We looked at an 8.5 emission scenario. That's kind of a high-end business as usual scenario. And then also a lower, kind of maybe a more modest 4.5 emission scenario. Hopefully, if we do some of the emission reductions that are planned, that will be the pathway that we'll be on in the near future. And these global models are pretty coarse in their spatial resolution, kind of on the order of hundreds of kilometers, several hundred miles in resolution. And really, to get to the scale we need at the station or ultimately at the county level, we had to look at downscaling approaches to get the right spatial and, in some cases, temporal resolutions. Go on, Michelle. So basically, speaking of the resolutions, these are the downscaling approaches, and you can see the three statistical methods we use. The data are available on the order of between 3 and 8 miles in terms of gridding. And then the fourth method was a dynamically downscaled method. So basically, for those of you that aren't familiar with dynamical downscaling, the idea here is the coarse resolution global models, the data from there are fed into a higher resolution model of in this case, North America. And there's two resolutions of these data. There's about a 30-mile resolution and about half of that, 15. In the end, maybe I'll cut to the chase of the next slide. Those bottom two, the LOCA analogs and the Cortex downscaling were the two methods that we ultimately ended up using. I should also mention that the LOCA method is the downscaling technique that's used in the latest National Climate Assessment. Go ahead, Michelle. So kind of moving on from there and looking at the methods, really the first thing that we did was take this station data and use it to simulate the values that are actually presented in NOAA Atlas 14. So you can go on, Michelle. Why did we do this? The slide said we wanted to replicate the methods used to derive Atlas 14, and to a certain extent that's true. I would say in the end, we tried to simulate the approach used by Atlas 14. There were a few things that, given the gridded data and things like that, replication might be too strong of a word. And we also wanted to make sure that our methods and our results were comparable to those that are presented by NOAA in Atlas 14. Go on. So real briefly in our approach, We use both the station data and ultimately the GCM data to generate what are called partial duration series. These are, if we have, let's say, 70 years of data, these are the 70 highest rainfall events that have occurred in that period. There's a slight provision there that they can't be too close to one another. And if my memory is correct, I think too close, they had to be within they couldn't be within 2 weeks of another. So there had to be at least 2 weeks of separation between these events to assure they were independent. We fit these data to a statistical distribution that's called the generalized extreme value distribution. It's pretty much the benchmark, the standard in extreme rainfall analysis. It's used as at the lion's share of the majority of stations analyzed by NOAA and Atlas 14 use this distribution. And to fit the data, we used the L moments approach, again, to replicate the NOAA methods. We looked at a number of different recurrence intervals for rainfall and a number of different durations from 1 to 24 hours. If you're familiar with NOAA Atlas 14, they use our regional L moments approach where information from other stations are used to fit the extreme value distributions. We did do that as well with the gridded data and also compared that if we just used single stations as well, and that those approaches were very comparable. You can go on, Michelle. So kind of to start things off here, the graphic on the right is basically looking at our approach compared to what's published in Atlas 14. This is daily rainfall, so it's at the 480 stations that were in the basin. So the box plots, the height of the box plots or the span of the box plots represent those 400 plus stations. If we were perfect, the box plots would be pretty narrow in their extent, and the red lines, the box plots medians, would be on that line, that's horizontal line that goes across the curve. So we do fairly well with the 2-year storm. As we move to the 5, the 10, and the 25-year storm, we are a bit underestimating the Atlas 14 numbers. But if you can see that kind of those two really thin lines, those are the confidence intervals that Atlas 14 gives for those storms. So in the majority of the cases, over 80% of the cases were falling within the confidence intervals. And then as we move to the higher storms, we tend to overestimate the Atlas 14 values. And the main reason there is that our data records start in 1950. The Atlas 14 record at many stations go to the beginning of the century. So what you see there actually is this idea of a non-stationarity in the precipitation record. We're excluding those years where presumably the rainfall events were lower in our methodology. Go on. And then, I mean, essentially, we did the same thing with the downscaled climate model data. So that's pretty much to move on here. In the next slide, we'll kind of show that, or at least build on that a little bit. Again, like I said earlier, we followed the same steps for producing these IDF curves. We looked at 3 70-year periods, historical period from 1950 to 2000. There are model simulations for that historical period. And then 2 future periods, basically a mid-century 2020, like now, to 2070, and then later on 2050 to 2100. The 70 years is kind of used for 2 reasons. It's to make sure we're not mistaken maybe any interdecadal cycles in the precip record that might occur on shorter time frames for real changes in the record, and also to assure we have enough data for fitting these extreme value distributions. Right, we're looking at 100-year storm, so we want to make sure we at least have a data record that approaches that. You see our process, again, pretty much like I said before, we followed what we did with the station data using the L moments method. You can go on, Michelle. So here, basically a couple of things to see. We did do some other testing to get the uncertainty of our approaches. So we did compare L moments for fitting the distribution with two other methods, and basically L moments was the one that won out there. It performed at least as well as the other method. And as I mentioned earlier, with the gridded data, we looked at this idea of incorporating neighboring grids into our L moments fitting for the higher order moments in the extreme rainfall, and also just using a single station approach. And the box plots on the left is for a particular downscaled data set. It's for the Cortex models, the dynamically downscaled data. And really here, what I'm showing is the difference between fitting this storm here, these different storms 2-year to 100-year, using a single grid approach or a regional grid approach. And as before, the box plots widths are all in all very, very narrow. Again, over 75% of the data are within 5% of that 1-to-1 line. Kind of where we would like it to fall along those red lines. So in the end, we opted to use this single grid approach to fit the downscaled data. I think you can go on. And I think with that, this is the pass the baton to Costa. So have at it, Costa.
Thank you so much, Art. And we at Carnegie Mellon were very grateful to work with Rand and Cornell and the team on this project. I wanted to give a special recognition to our lead analyst, Dr. Tanya Lopez Cantu, who worked on this problem as part of her PhD thesis and now is working at Esri in a new position. And we also had PhD student Marissa Weber, who is currently a student at Carnegie Mellon, also helping out on this project. So without their contributions, this whole project would not have been possible. So after the downscaled climate model data IDF curves were generated, the next step was to generate change factors. And so this is how we actually start to use the information for the start of some decision making. So next slide, please. So the team calculated these change factors across all of the downscaled data sets for every grid cell in the region, for both of these future time periods, for two of greenhouse gas emissions scenarios, representative concentrations pathways 4.5, which would represent a moderate to lower emissions scenario, and RCP 8.5, which would represent a very high emission scenario. And for each of the return periods that we generally use in stormwater analysis, 2, 5, 10, 25, 50, and 100 years. And so change factors that we used are based on the quantile delta method, and it's the ratio of a future IDF curve to the historic IDF curve value. Next slide, please. Now, I work in a civil engineering department, and there are equations that are in books on how one is supposed to design a bridge. There are no such equations standardized for the ways and the methods that are used to project future rainfall for decision making. There are several different methods. We use the change factor method, which is one of the more common methods. And it has a bunch of advantages. It's very simple to understand. It can be applied directly to Atlas 14 values, and it avoids some of the complexities of the other approaches. Next slide, please. Now, when stakeholders are interested in precipitation information, they're often interested in sub-daily values, right? The values that we have produced here are in daily values, 24-hour precipitation information. Now, there's a lot more research that's needed to better understand how the changes in hourly extremes are represented in global climate models. However, some of the analysis that we and others have done have shown for cities in this region, for selected cities in this region, The change factors for the 1 hour value and our 24-hour values are very similar. And so we are confident that using the 24-hour values for this type of analysis are a good first step in thinking about how to use this information for decision making. Next slide, please. So we took very great care in trying to understand the differences between the 4 publicly available downscaled climate model data sets that Art was mentioning. And we found that 2 of those, BCCA v2 and MACA, produced results that were inconsistent with our observed regional patterns. That's not to say that they're not beneficial, but they were inconsistent for these regional patterns. And so we included LOCA and Cordex in our final change factors for our online tool. However, I'll note that Dr. Lopez Cantu and a colleague from NCAR and me, we did together a paper that evaluates all of these data sets, and we published that paper online, and all the data sets are available there, and I will put that link in the chat. But for this tool, we found that LOCA and Cordex are the best 2 data sets to represent this range of information for decision making for this region. Next slide, please. So after the climate change informed IDF change factors were generated, then we had to think about uncertainty bounds. Next slide. So remember what I said about the bridge equations. We are in the wild west of IDF curve generation information. And stakeholders and decision makers need to take great care in understanding how uncertainty is represented in the information that they have, included at all in the information that they have, and managed. Because there are no single answers here. There are ranges of answers. And you have to be very wary of folks who claim to have the single point value estimate. Uncertainty in future rainfall that is climate driven can result from the statistical fitting techniques, the downscaling methods, the global climate models themselves, as well as the scenario uncertainty around which future greenhouse gas concentration we are going to end up in. And so if you build a culvert or green infrastructure or stormwater retention basins or any type of infrastructure that is going to be affected by climate change, that infrastructure is going to likely be around for a long time. And the decisions that you make now might lock in that performance over a very long period of time if that infrastructure is not unable to be adapted or doesn't get adapted in the future as things change. So it's very, very important to understand the range of uncertainty that you are using for stormwater information for future climate change. We represented uncertainty from the statistical methods by a bootstrapping method. And we did this across GCMs and emission scenarios. And we produced a range of change factors across the return periods. Next slide, please. So Michelle will demonstrate the tool shortly, but this is an output from a similar tool. The red line here is the Atlas 14 curve. We'll note that the Atlas 14 curve, if you go onto the website, does include uncertainty bounds, right? So there already are confidence intervals on the existing Atlas 14 values, but the point value, the median is generally what people are using. We included for our IDF curves this range of future values. So you'll see a solid blue line as the projected future curve, and then a 75% confidence interval in the dark blue and a 90% confidence interval in the light blue. I understand that engineers and stakeholders do not like ranges, they like point values. I get it, I do too. However, if you are designing a critical infrastructure system Maybe this is a stormwater system around the road network to a hospital. Maybe it's retention ponds that are upstream of some very flood-prone areas. Maybe it's other infrastructure that you are wanted to have additional factors of safety to be robust against future uncertainty. Decision makers have the data with our tool to select amongst a range of these values to potentially go above the median projected IDF curves. Next slide, please. So the final step in this process was to generate county level change factors. Now, we all know that thunderstorms and heavy precipitation events don't respect county boundaries or political boundaries, but that often stakeholders need to make infrastructure decisions within those boundaries. Next slide, please. So the team generated an area-weighted average of the change factor for each of the grid cells within the county. And so able to basically produce a change factor for a county by that are represented inside of that county. And we also evaluated how these county change factors, how uncertain they were relative to the grid cells. And we found that the county change factors that we developed are a fairly good fit, and we're confident that we're able to use these for decision making. So a stakeholder in each of these counties would be able to understand the work that's able to be, the type of precipitation information that is necessary to inform green, gray, and other infrastructure decisions. And that I'll pass it back to Michelle for a demo of the tool.
Thanks, Costa. Let me just, so here I'm going to demo the tool that will show the county change factors, and those change factors applied to stations within the region. I will take a second as I switch screens, but just wanted to highlight this is the URL for the tool. It should have been in the announcement for this webinar, and we'll also paste it into the chat today, so y'all have access to it. So just give me 1 second while I switch screens. Okay, so welcome to the tool. This is the result, the main kind of usable output of our work. There's also a technical report. I'll show y'all where that is on this website that provides all the details that we went through today. But first, let me orient you to what you're seeing. So automatically you can see a lot of colors and a lot of location markers. For the counties that overlay and reside within the boundaries of the Chesapeake Bay watershed, which is shown in yellow, as well as all the counties within the state of Virginia. So the colors here change by county because we present the change factors at the county scale. So that's what you're seeing. The color on the map are these change factors. So you can see there's a legend here at the bottom that shows you, and really we're looking right now at positive change factors, which means for the 2-year storm, and I'll go through on the selection panel in a minute, most of the counties in the region are somewhere between 1.1 to 1.2, which is a 10 to 20% increase in the 2-year storm between 2020 and 2070. So that's how to kind of conceptualize the change factors. For anyone who wants to relook at the definition of change factor, you can just hover over this little question mark in the legend, and that will show you the definition that we use for change factor with a couple examples. So the map is showing change factors by county. The other thing that you'll immediately notice on the map are these location markers. These are the location of Atlas 14 stations with appropriate historic record that we've applied change factors to. So there are two ways to get information from this tool: the change factors in the county themselves, or stations where the change factors have already been applied to Atlas 14 values. And I'll go through what that means and how to use that in a minute, but just wanted to first orient you with immediately what you're seeing on the map. The second thing you may have automatically noticed is this selection panel over here on the left. So this allows you to select from the return periods that we calculated the change factors for. So as Costa mentioned earlier, these are the typical ones used for stormwater infrastructure design, and they range from 2-year to 100-year. So you can select, for example, the 50-year. You'll see for the map automatically changed with the new change factors for the 50-year storm. And those values are bigger in many cases. So you see those went from kind of a medium green to about a light blue. So for those particular counties, you could expect a greater change in the future for the 50-year storm than for the 2-year storm. You can also select from emission scenarios. So the high, the more aggressive scenario, or the low, which is a more moderate scenario. So you'll see the change factors are typically higher for the high scenario than for the low scenario. You can also select between two 50-year time periods. And again, the change factors are the ratio between the IDF curve value for one of these future periods to the baseline period from Atlas 14, which is 1950 to 2020. So you can select either of these periods depending on the planning horizon you're interested, depending on the expected life of the infrastructure you're designing, or other considerations that you may have. So in general, the later time period shows bigger changes. You can also, in this selection panel, you automatically will view both regions. But we've also added the functionality. If you're just interested in the watershed, excuse me, you can kind of eliminate the rest of Virginia if you choose to. And likewise, if you're a Virginia stakeholder and you don't, care about what's going on in Southern New York, you can select Virginia and it will automatically zoom into that portion of the map. So that's what we mean by area of interest. I'm going to go back to both. So that's a selection panel. A couple other things to highlight before we actually go into the meat of the data in the tool. We have these tabs at the top: how to use the tool, using the data, and technical resources. Using the tool, you just select it and a pop-up window comes up and will describe really everything I'm going through today in abbreviated form. If you want to remember how to access data, how to access individual IDF curves, what the selection panel means, how to download data, or a supported browser. Just to note that like many other tools, we've made the decision not to support Internet Explorer, but do support the other more widely used browsers. So that's always there for you. It's kind of like a Cliff's Notes version of what we're going through today. I'll do using the data last, because that's the more meaty portion of this. Technical resources is the far left tab. That allows you to access the technical report that we all wrote. It's publicly available, downloadable. Details our methodologies, some of the side analyses that Art mentioned that we did, as well as Costa on, for example, looking at the variance of the grid cells within a county compared to the county change factors. So that's all in there. You just click on this hyperlink, find the report here, and you can access and download that at any time. There's also a webinar if you want to hear me do a very expedited version of this talk at any point in time. You can access that. And then there's just some notes here on who we are, the study team, and a citation, as well as contact information for me if you end up with questions on the tool or this study. And I'll route you to the right person on our team if it's something I can't answer. We'll also post journal publications as those come out, and then eventually the link to our code that underlies this work. Okay, so the final bit before I actually show you how to use the data is using the data tab. So here, what we've done is highlight the correct applications of the data tool and the incorrect applications of the data tool. So basically how to use this and how not to use it, to make sure you're applying these change factors if you choose not to use the already adjusted station data, how to use them correctly. And I'll return to this. I just wanted to highlight that this was here after we go through the actual IDF curves and the county change factors and how to access and use all of that. There's this big pink button here that says download all data. That will literally do that. It will download all the county level change factors across return periods, time periods, and emission scenarios for the entire study region, which is, again, all of the counties that cross or reside within the boundaries of the Chesapeake Bay watershed, as well as within the state of Virginia. So that's available to y'all at any point in time. It's a CSV, should be really easy to use, and that is there. So again, I'll return to these points, and I'm sure y'all will have questions on how to actually use the data, but I want to dig into the data a little bit first. Okay, so what I'm going to do is zoom in. We're going to take so to zoom in, you can either push the plus button, or, depending on your cursor, I just use the scroll on my mouse. So let's pretend we are in Lancaster County. There are kind of two ways to look at this. One is to hover your mouse over the county itself, over Lancaster County. And a pop-up window will emerge with the change factors. Those change factors, we show the range, as Costa mentioned, that uncertainty range, which is we've quantified as the 10th, 20th, 75th, and 90th percentile around the median. And you can apply those values to gridded Atlas 14 estimates that you've downloaded yourself, assuming that the historic record used in those gridded estimates is similar to what we've used for our analysis as the historic baseline, which is 1950 to 2000. So those change factors can be accessed here by just using the pop-up tool, writing them down, downloading them in the bulk download in the using the data tab, and then applied to the gridded Atlas 14 values, again with a similar historic record. That's one way to use and access the data. The second is we've done some of the hard work for you and already applied those change factors. And by apply, I mean multiply. And I'll show you how that works in a minute, to Atlas 14 stations or estimates from station data. So for Lancaster County, there are two stations, Safe Harbor Dam and Lancaster 2, I believe that's probably the Northeast Filtration Plant, must have a rain gauge on it. So you can click either of those. So what you would do here is select, a window will pop up. You should recognize this. Costa went through a screenshot of this, probably from a different county, different station. So this is the Lancaster to Atlas 14 values with the Lancaster County change factors applied. So you can see, again, oops, there's lots of ways to access the data. So I'm going to not have the pop-up window come up yet. The red line, again, is the Atlas 14 value. The dark blue line is the Atlas 14 value multiplied by the median change factor. And then the ribbons, the light blue and the dark blue, use either the 10th to 90th ranges to generate the range, or the 10th, 90th, excuse me, percentiles that are, again, available if you just hover over the county. And the darker blue ribbon uses the 25th to 75th percentile to calculate that range. So that's what you're seeing here. You can hover over any of these. Again, this is an IDF curve setup, so you have duration as the x-axis and depth as the y. And this is for the 50-year return period. At any point, you can hover over one of these durations to get the actual values and the ranges, so you can view them that way. You can also go back to the return period and switch between the 25-year, the 10-year, the 5-year storm. You can switch between the emission scenarios so you can see how those change. Same with time periods. So lots of options to adjust the tool here. You can toggle on and off the confidence intervals. So this will toggle on, the red toggles on the Atlas 14 one. The blue toggles on and off our calculated confidence intervals with the projected IDF curves. You can download this image or this figure as an image by clicking what Art calls the hamburger. I had never heard of that before, but this kind of 3 horizontal lines in, you know, as many forms as you could probably possibly want for an image. So lots of flexibility here. You can also hover over the station if you forget what county you're in, and it will tell you the location of the station itself. So that's the actual visible IDF curve. You can see this data in tabular form. So this shows there's a lot of different things going on here, but you have the county change factors that again were if you hovered over Lancaster County, you would see that pop up. These are also here for reference. And then we have all of the Atlas 14 durations on this first column. So it goes from 5 minutes to 7 days with the 24-hour county change factors applied. Again, our research has shown that these are relevant and applicable across durations. And so these are these show the Atlas 14 values, which are in the rightmost column, with the change factors from each of these columns applied. So for example, the 5 minute here to the 90th is 4.6 times 1.33 to get 0.61. So that's the math that's going on here. You can download this all as a CSV, so you can access it. For this particular, again, this doesn't download all the stations, it will just download this particular station, which is different than the using the data tab. And then if you want to do a comparison of the actual depth and the actual magnitude of the change factor rather than the ratio form, you can see that in the final tab here called comparison, which shows the Atlas 14 depth. These are the median values, and then the projected depth, and then the difference. So you can look at that as well. Okay, so that's how you access, manipulate, download the data using Lancaster County as an example. And then returning to the using the data tab here, the correct applications of the data tool, I'm just going to kind of read through these and leave them up there and then see if folks have questions. This will be the last thing you hear me talking to. Okay, so for correct applications of the data tool, so you can use the station-based projected IDF curves. So those are what I showed you, those projected curves that you click on a station to get for typical engineering applications, thinking about, what part of that uncertainty range is relevant for you. And Costa gave a couple examples of, you may in some cases want additional safety factors added. So you may go into the upper end of that range for that particular asset. So that's the first application. The second is to apply the county level change factors, as I mentioned earlier, to gridded Atlas 14 values within that county, importantly, which I did not mention earlier, that cover a roughly similar historic period. So 1950, we used the 50-year period, 1950 to 1999, but we're conceptualizing it for ease of 1950 to 2000. So something roughly similar. You wouldn't want to apply the county level change factor to 1920 to 1965, for example. That would be too different from our baseline. So the other thing you could do is take the projected 2020 to 2070 or 2050 to 2100 values from the stations. So this isn't the change factors, these are the projected station values. To any updated Atlas 14 values that cover a more recent time period. So I know the state of Virginia, for example, is initiating a process to update Atlas 14 to include a more recent historical record. So in that case, you couldn't directly apply the change factors, but what you could do is take the projected values from the tool and look at how different those are from the updated Atlas 14, assuming that those Atlas 14 updates use a similar methodology. Okay, so the final bit in correct applications is examine the range of uncertainty in the station-based values or in the change factors. We really want to highlight that there is no single best estimate of the future. And when thinking about infrastructure design, it's really important to think about that full range. And the tendency is to pick a single value because it's easier, it's more time efficient, but we really want to provide that range to illustrate that things could change a lot within it. And for more, for riskier assets or ones that have a longer life, it may be worth thinking about moving into the upper end of that range and at least considering it. So that's an important application of the data tool. And then what not to do. I kind of already implied all of these, but don't apply change factors directly to Atlas 14 values with a different period. Then the other is don't apply these to IDF curves that aren't available in Atlas 14 and that were derived using a different methodology. We are very intentional in creating our methodology around Atlas 14, given the widespread use of it, so that it would have kind of the most impact and the most utility across the region. That being said, there may be some of y'all out there not using Atlas 14. And if the methods are wildly different than Atlas 14, these change factors would not be relevant in that case. So with that, I will stop. I'll stop sharing my screen. And David, we can move into a Q&A.
Great. Thanks, Michelle. We definitely had a lot of questions come in, and we've got about 20 minutes. We're going to try to get through as many as we can. And if our panelists are willing, we'll try to maybe address a few of them offline for folks if we're able to later. What I want to do, just to kind of kick things off a little bit, is to take a step back before I dive into some of the specific clarification questions and things that folks have. Obviously, there's a ton of detail. There's a lot of meat on this, and we dove into methods and we dove into kind of demonstrating the tool. So for the folks that, kind of want the top line, big picture idea, maybe for Michelle or Costa, I'll direct this at you guys. How would you sort of frame the biggest takeaways of this tool and this work for stormwater managers? I had sort of a question come in at the very beginning in terms of an interest, for instance, in sort of just understanding it at the highest level, how IDF curves, like why are they so important for climate change mitigation and adaptation planning for communities? So, just trying to put this into sort of that bigger context for folks before we really dive into the more detailed questions.
I can take the first round of answering that. It's a great question, David. And then Costa, Art, feel free, jump in. I know y'all probably have lots of perspectives on this as well. I would answer that kind of along the same lines as the motivations I laid out to kick off the talk, is that precipitation is changing and the current methods or current resources out there don't necessarily reflect even recent changes in precipitation, which leaves infrastructure, people vulnerable to flooding because those assets weren't designed to those conditions. And so this study is really geared towards creating a straightforward, as simple as it can be, and transparent methodology to help infrastructure designers think about how to incorporate those future projections into design to make sure that we're not kind of repeating similar flood events, similar destructive experiencing similar damages that we've seen in the recent years. And we need to protect our assets. And so it's kind of a bit more in the motivation side of this, but yeah, I mean, without design standards and design that considers future changes, infrastructure will be designed to what we've seen in the past, and we know that's changing. So Costa, Art, and anything else y'all want to add there?
Okay, great. So we'll go into a couple more of the questions. I had one a little bit about application of these tools, and it's a little bit about the scope of this project, but wondering if the research team looked or ran some of these projected IDF curves through any commonly used stormwater models or stormwater management models like SWIM or something like that around the bay to sort of see how it compared with the Atlas 14 derived IDF curves.
I can say this particular team for this particular project, we haven't taken the projected values and run them through a hydrologic model to understand, how changes in design storms are affecting kind of runoff and then potentially in turn affecting flooding. But I'll turn it to maybe Costa first, see if there's certainly other people doing that work. Happy to talk about it, but I want to see if Costa or Art have any kind of other studies they want to highlight.
The slide that Michelle showed in the beginning from the Fischbach et al. Work in Pittsburgh did use a similar method to run change factors that were developed with other team members here through SWIM. What's clear to us is that there's not a uniform way of doing this. There's also not a lot of folks that are applying this to actual concrete and green infrastructure in the ground right now at any level. And so if somebody uses any tool, we feel that that's better than nothing. But we're hoping that this and other works that are similar to this are starting to advance the field towards a holistic understanding of change factors and climate-informed IDF curves for decision-making. So that's a quick way of saying we hope that many more folks are going to start to push these type of information through their existing hydrologic models and decision-making frameworks.
All right, I think you're on mute if you wanted to weigh in.
Yep. The only thing I'd add is kind of the previous iteration of this work was actually done for the state of New York, and the results are being used actually quite extensively in New York City in a lot of their urban stormwater design, a lot of their green infrastructure design within the city.
Great. I have a couple of questions on, sort of the application side of things a little bit, if you guys are willing to talk a little bit about that. One of which is for our folks that are in the coastal communities that are dealing with tidal flooding as a major concern, and in some cases more so than non-tidal flooding. So the question was based on your county sets of IDF, change factors. How might localities go forward in maybe using a tool like this for updating its FEMA floodplain maps? Is that an appropriate, application, of these, tools to sort of help evaluate increased levels of precipitation and mitigation strategies in tidal areas?
I can take the first pass, but again, Costa, Art, we'll do the same thing, open it up to y'all. Yeah, I mean, just, as we were saying, any use of this tool for modeling to understand how these change factors are precipitating for no pun intended, kind of through into runoff and flooding would be a great application. Again, assuming that you either use the direct values from the tool or you apply the change factors to gridded values with the same historic record. So just throwing that out there again. One of the other advantages of the tool, I'm going to go back to the uncertainty range, but you could run them through to calculate the FEMA flood, recalculate, the 100-year flood, for example, with the different ranges of change factors to understand how that floodplain could shift. So instead of calculating it once, run through, take the upper or lower bound and the median. And that would be a really robust way to think about how your floodplain could change into the future rather than assuming the median value. It's a bit more work, but once the setup is there, it's an additional 2 runs of the model. So that would be kind of one thing I would add. That would be a really nice best practice. And as researchers, we're trying to work with a lot of, flood management agencies, et cetera, to really integrate that type of thinking into their modeling. And we hope this tool will provide that flexibility.
Okay. Another question sort of related to application, so, one of our participants pointed out, a lot of designs and stormwater design manuals sort of account for a factor of safety and have some over design based criteria. I was wondering if any of you had any thoughts on sort of how communities, could weigh this data in the context of, maybe current criteria that is meant to be over designed a bit.
I'll actually kick that one to Costa because I know that's like a bit more in your area, but happy to take the second pass on that one if you'd like.
Sure. Like any infrastructure, the engineer has judgment to change what is on the ground, consistent with local and state standards. There is uncertainty on what the final choice of culvert design return periods that was used in existing culverts, and this is something that Dr. Lopez Conte had worked on in her PhD as well. What the change factor method that is presented here does is enable decision makers from different types of organizations to understand the range of future rainfall that infrastructure would experience as input into whatever process they're already using. So they could go to their existing culvert if they have knowledge that it was over designed for some reason. They can say, we know that this culvert can handle a storm of a depth of up to this level. They could calculate what that depth would be based off of our projected change factors and assume that or estimate that culvert is likely safe up to some future return period, right? So these methods does not prescribe which return period to design for. They just say what the values of rain are going to be for those future return periods across 2 different climate scenarios and 2 different time periods.
Great. And I think that this is actually, in a way, sort of a related question, and obviously you guys aren't going to, advise folks which specific, emission scenario to use because it might differ. But, for folks that are not as familiar with some of the climate models and what those emission scenarios represent, what are some of the things that folks should be considering if they are looking into kind of what scenario to use if they're thinking about project design, right? Because it does make a big difference whether they're using the 4.5 or the 8.5 in the tool. So, what are some of the things that they should maybe be looking at or thinking about when kind of weighing those decisions?
Yeah, if I can jump in there, Michelle. I mean, I think the first thing is how long do they expect the infrastructure to last or withstand something to be? Because quite frankly, there's not much difference between, there's not much net difference in, say, extreme rainfall between the 4.5 and 8.5 scenario out till about mid-century. So if that kind of time horizon is really what you're looking at, that 2020 to 2070 timeframe, the 2 scenarios really don't make much of a difference. But if you go out beyond there, there's where the scenario really plays a bigger role. So I think that would be my first line consideration in terms of what I want to use. And in some ways that's, maybe that's a good thing in a way, because again, I think the scenario is, especially out at the end of the period, is a large source of uncertainty. And, Michelle talked about non-stationarity in the rainfall record, but right, we also have non-stationarity in terms of way society is going to respond to climate change. So if over the next, over the next decade, we do go to zero emissions and things like that, that would also, you'd have to weigh that in as well in terms of which you would use. But knowing that range of uncertainty is clearly the way you'd want to bring that in.
And in some instances, you might be able to make a decision that is adaptable for future changes. And so maybe you'd want to design to the lower emission scenario now as you're hopeful, and see how both information and emissions evolve, and build in the possibility of future changes to your design, additional green infrastructure or other best management practices to deal with unexpected events.
All right, I had one more sort of quicker question, and it's about the applicability of the methods to other regions. We do have, while we're a mostly Chesapeake Bay, focused audience, we have a number of folks joining us from the Northeast, North Carolina, even a few from the West Coast. So just sort of the question was, when the GitHub repository is available for the curve data, will it help allow people to sort of replicate these methods outside of the Bay watershed, given that they have the data, to actually run the methods?
Yeah, I'll take that first and then see if Art or Costa wants to jump in. One of the goals with this study was transparency with the methods. We wanted, people to really understand what we did so it could be replicable, and absolutely these methods apply. It may be that different volumes of Atlas 14 have slightly different historical records they use, so that may need to be adjusted depending on the region. Art could probably fill in more there, but otherwise the core of the methodology, using, I think, even the technical report, it would require more, obviously, building of code yourself, but could be replicated. And we tried to reproduce and describe the methods in a way that it could be.
Yeah, I'll echo what Michelle said. And I mean, actually, the method or at least slight variations of the method have already been applied in New York, in New Jersey. So kind of moving up the coast. Yeah, I think the methodology in terms of the fitting of extremes and things like that, that's the standard method that's been used by Atlas 14 across the country. So that method should work. The one thing I would probably, if I was applying this, say in California or something like that, might have to look to just see how well the climate models are able to simulate the extreme rainfall characteristics in different parts of the world. I mean, the East Coast is pretty similar, but if we moved into the arid Southwest or something like that, that would definitely be some research I would want to see conducted before it was just blindly applied.
I'll just quickly say, there's lots of uncertainty involved in this, but doing nothing, which is basically not what you all are doing because you all are here on this presentation, but out in the engineering world, Atlas 14 still is by and large the base precipitation that people are using. So as we move from that world to a different world, it's important to understand and manage and respect the uncertainty and design for robustness across the most critical networks. And really, I can say it again, these data that we have are open. We should be prioritizing open data, open methods, so that this field is able to learn and grow and understand all the challenges as we move forward.
Great. So we've got 6 minutes left. And so I just want to close with sort of one more forward-looking question. And before I do that, just a reminder to folks, I just put a direct link to our evaluation survey in the chat. So please, if you take a few minutes, like I said, it's 3 or 4 questions. We really are interested in your thoughts, not just on today, but also what you're working on and ways that we can sort of help you in the future. It's a really good opportunity to get some feedback. I also put my email in the chat. If you have further questions, I can help facilitate those answers. All right. So with the last couple of minutes, basically, I just wanted to ask you the forward-looking question and say, I was wondering if I could get your thoughts on what you'd like to see come next, whether it is sort of the high priority additional research in your mind to sort of further build upon this work, or, if it's something that you see or think that we need to really kind of put at the forefront of our efforts in the Bay watershed as we start moving towards kind of implementation and shifting how we are planning, designing, or maintaining our stormwater practices as a result of these efforts. So I'll sort of leave it up to you how you want to reply to that, but I'd love your thoughts.
Yeah, I'll go again. I'll go first. It's a big question. I mean, I have a lot of different answers. So I'll stay narrow to extending this study rather than thinking more broadly about adaptive stormwater management in the mid-Atlantic, which I think all of us could probably talk for a long time about. But in terms of extending the work, some I think key next steps, at least in my head, there's a lot I think that could be said on the technical side, but on the decision science piece of this, I think there's some kind of natural progression of this work to understand how entities that are using climate data across the US are thinking about and actually operationalizing those uncertainty ranges. As researchers, we know the value of doing that, and we often work with individual agencies to create studies that look at those ranges and make adaptive management plans out of them. But at kind of this macro scale of building a tool with these ranges in them, I think it's really important to understand how people are actually consuming and implementing this data. Are they using the median? Is anyone using the 90th percentile? Kind of these bigger questions of the actual application and use of the data, so that in future iterations of tools like this or similar projects, we can really communicate and better tailor the data products to the needs and use across this region and across the US. So I think that decision science piece is a really important next step.
Yeah, I think I would kind of follow that up with, I don't think this study can just, we have the website and it's done and it has to sit there. This and anything like that pretty much has to be dynamic. There's going to be new sets of data that are coming out, new climate model runs that are coming out as we move into the future. We will get higher spatial resolution in the global model suite that we have. The temporal resolution will increase. The ability of the models to I think I was going to follow up Costa's response is, there's a lot of uncertainty in using just Atlas 14 now, and that's not meant to be negative on Atlas 14, but clearly, the climate is changing. So the past data that Atlas 14 used, there is uncertainty whether that applies to the future. And clearly the things in extreme rainfall and climate models, it's the hardest things for climate models to get, the convection, the thunderstorms and things like that. So I think as we go on, we have to really see how the IDF curves that we produced and the change factors that are produced kind of play out, both with new models and as the new data series kind of comes up. There's no reason why something like Atlas 14 can't be dynamic and be out there as new rainfall comes in and not just updated on decadal basis, or I kind of saw in the chat for some states and not for others. So that would kind of give some credence to what we've seen, and is the real world playing out along the lines of what we're showing with these projections.
I'll just say quickly, thank you for all the work that you all do, for attending this presentation. We are grateful to the Chesapeake Bay Trust. I'm grateful to get to work with Michelle and Art on this project. Remember that this is a challenge, not just for all the stuff that we build in the future, but the stuff that we have now, which is largely going to be with us, well into the future. 97% of the federal highway system was constructed under the precipitation information of Atlas 14's predecessor, TP40. And so if we think about the long life, decadal or multi-decadal or even century-long life of infrastructure, the work that you all are doing now will have a big impact, and we're very grateful for it.
Well, I'll just say thank you one more time to all of our excellent panelists and researchers, Michelle and Art and Costa. We can let all of you go. I know some of you have other presentations immediately following this one, so thank you for all of your hard work and kind of running around. We're really grateful to have you, and I think that this work is really exciting and is going to mean a lot to the communities around the Bay Watershed as we move forward. So I'll just wrap things up here. I just want to pull back up one last time for folks, a reminder, if you can take our evaluation, we are very interested in hearing from you if you are working with these tools, if you are not, if you are planning to in the future, and then how we can support and facilitate you doing so and help you with your comfort level and understanding with these tools and whatnot. So that's a big part of it's wrapped into one question, but we appreciate your thoughts that you have there. And then I'll just conclude by, letting folks know that this is part of a webcast series that we run every year. We do 12 to 15 of these free webcasts annually, and we do have several more that are already open for registration if you are interested. They're on very different topics than what we talked about today, but we're talking about implementation that is, led through community engagement and kind of working with your stakeholders to implement better projects. New tools that are available for better incorporating equity into your green infrastructure planning projects, as well as sort of ways of using tools and data to target and grow your watershed stewardship and outreach programs. So if you're interested in some of these other topics, I encourage you to go over and register. Same thing, free, about an hour-long session, hour and a half long session, and we hope you join us. So with that, I will let everyone go. Thank you for everyone who stuck with us all the way for the hour and a half. I think we're only a minute or two over, so apologies for that. But I'll make the recording available and we'll send that out to you all by the end of today, hopefully. So thanks again. Thanks again to all of our panelists, and we will hopefully see you all soon.
Thanks for your attention, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.